I'll start off in terms of, I thought like red color is the right color, because I think last session we had a lot of questions, but a lot of unanswered questions in that sense of the word. And also what is happening in terms of the skill segment, people talking negative vibes in terms of it's not sustainable, etc., etc., adding to the color. I'll spend quickly only 2-3 slides. We'll spend some time in terms of what is this full ecosystem we are talking about. A lot of points has been added in the first segment, so I'll just make it a little faster. Key problem is in terms of the lack of connect in the employment market, what we are talking about. So if that is the ecosystem and that is the problem which we are talking about, the first segment, in the first extreme here is the supply. The supply, what we are talking about is in terms of the 12 million people who are entering into the labor force every year, the 510 million people who are already working. All these people have got various degrees of capability and they are looking at various degrees of employment. Like a PhD might be looking at in terms of getting into a research kind of a job, and 2 or 3 other companies who are focusing on graduates and above. There will be people like carpenters, masons, this, that, etc., who's really looking at an entrepreneurship or getting into an informal sector kind of a job. That is one extreme of this chain. You have the other extreme here, which is demand. Like Novartis is trying to take some PhDs for their research kind of a project at one extreme, and then maybe ISB wanted to get this roofs changed or get this room painted. He or she will contact the job contractor who's getting into painting, etc. That's also a kind of a job. So you have, everybody needs productive workforce and the right fit kind of a person to do that particular job. Then you have in this chain a key player, which is the institutions. Okay, we can talk about this 450 universities at one extreme, which is playing this role, to the end of 8,800 odd ITIs, which is there, to the end of saying that there are around 6,900 VTPs, which is registered with DGET. All of these players are coming together to bridge this gap between demand and supply. Then we have this government in terms of playing its role in terms of bridging this gap. Other than the 17 ministries as such, we have NSDC, those kind of players, but hardly three are the key ministries which is into skilling, MORD, MOLE and MHRD in terms of playing that particular role. Then you have a whole host of intermediaries. I think recruitment companies, around the latest estimate is around 4 lakh registered recruitment companies are all over there. You have assessment companies all across the country. You have technology enabled players, etc., which is again playing a role as an intermediary in bridging this gap. Then we have these businesses. Now here we need to put the life in perspective. Out of the 510 million workforce which we are talking about, hardly 10% of these things are in the organized sector, which means 50 million people are only working in the organized sector, out of which we leave that 20 million aside for government jobs and other things. What we are talking about is just 30 million people in the organized sector, and that is where the full-time jobs are available. So maximum kinds of a job is getting created in the unorganized sector. The numbers which is being thrown out by NSDC or anybody, which says 100 million jobs in manufacturing by 2020, or 35 million jobs in construction, or 10 million jobs in tourism, etc., is being thrown up in the unorganized sector, and that's the key problem. And I think that is the blurring what we are seeing in the discussions here. I mean, it's not a graduate or a person from an urban side looking out for a job. The informal sector and the formal sector line is getting blurred. Vocational education is for the dropouts in that sense of it. And inability to understand that dynamics is what is creating this whole illusion of a failure which people are talking about. So this entire ecosystem, what we are putting in, is what is nothing but a human capital supply chain which we are talking about. Now, how do we handle the supply chain? Now, what's the problem? Whatever we discussed now, highly fragmented, everybody is looking in silos, hence it is unintelligent or inefficient. How do we address this kind of ecosystem issues? In the conversation, people were talking about mismatch of aspiration versus capability. Rightfully so. A graduate can aspire to be getting into a 35,000 rupee kind of a job, because his capability might be to only get a 5,000, 7,000 rupee job. Naturally, and in terms of a tool design engineer, he might aspire to get into an AC room and start working, but he may not understand the nuts and bolts of what is a fitting machinist and those kind of things. So there is an issue of capability versus aspirations and mismatch. From an employer side, or from a corporate side of it, or from a person who's looking, ISB kind of a side, who's wanting to get this room painted kind of a side, it is precisely just a problem of not able to get that talent or not able to get the business. I think that's a more easier problem in terms of it's an information issue, which I think we will have to track it through an IT system or various kinds of systems which will fall in place. Bigger problem is going to be on the matching aspirations and capability, which is in the employability space what we are looking at. So how do we address this issue is the first question which was coming in. The first part of it is ensuring that you reach to the candidate, you acquire this candidate, and also start looking at the counseling and the assessment piece. Today people speak about assessment. What is the predictability of this assessment? If I go to the bus stands or a railway station, the palm reader, you find a lot of astrologers or this, the palm readers looking at your hand or a palm can say, oh, 5 years may you will be here, 10 years may you will be here. That has much better predictability than the assessments and counseling which we are talking about. I mean, because there is no link. I mean, they are talking in terms of you're not keeping the reality in place, and then you're talking in terms of saying that this is the assessment required, this is the kind of systems required. That's the kind of things which is there. Then comes capability and suitability. Now, in terms of capability and suitability point of view, we talked about drivers, and somebody was talking about maids and drivers. These are the people who has got used to minimum wage, used to daily wages. Out of our workforce, around 150 million odd people are doing daily wages kind of an activity. Or 350 million who is into the illiterate are doing daily wages kind of an activity. You try to make him to an organized segment, pay him monthly wages, he will run away. So there is a mindset issue which we need to face in terms of addressing that entire suitability and capability, and then comes the productivity. Say for example, if I am a painter and I have got this contract to paint this, ISB will pay me a fixed contract, 1 lakh rupees you take for painting this. Whether I do it in 10 days or 15 days is not ISB's problem. But if I am able to do this in 7 days, the worker will feel that he is productive. Then he will come for a certification, then he will come to us in terms of getting the more activity done. Quick one in terms of what an industry has to require in terms of, Murli was talking at that time in terms of job role. Job role in terms of what are the tasks, activities required for doing a job. Combination of this job as an occupation or the occupational standards what we're talking about is very important. I mean, we've started doing it through national occupation standards or sector skill councils, converting each job into data, knowledge, skills, behavior, performance units, getting them to some level of scores is very important in terms of setting this up. So now if you have an exit gate, what industry requires, it's not a job. It can be in terms of informal sector, etc. And you have an entry score, if it evolves as a counseling or an assessment, then the problem becomes easier. You can profile a candidate when he walks into data, knowledge, skills, behavior, employer's job descriptions or what is required for painting kind of thing can also get bifurcated with this thing. Then it's a matching issue. You match it, if it matches, give him the thing of productivity. If it doesn't match, he needs training. It's a homogeneous kind of a system which is there. So, quick one, in terms of if this is a knowledge quotient and if it is a sourcing quotient is nothing but delivery, the jobs in his location. This is a knowledge level required. You have counseling companies, high on knowledge. You have assessment companies, training companies, again high on knowledge. You have certification companies and occupational standards companies, high on knowledge. All these are knowledge players. Then you have job portals like Naukri, which is at the intersection, vocational training, I'm not getting into the detail. Then you have companies like Adico, Mafa, Team Lease, who's into recruitment. Transactional. Just try to applying to a recruitment company. The recruiter will treat you with respect if he has a vacancy in mind. Otherwise, he will tell you in terms of send the CV into this ID. It goes to the junk box. So it's purely transactional. And then you have this housing providers, you have this training infrastructure providers, which is again making up into the sourcing of the fulfillment market envelope. Now, everybody wants to go there. Productive workforce, the sweet spot what we are talking about. See how industry is evolving. See, you will find in terms of team lease kind of a companies, here, taking over IIJT, integrating part of Meta AI, moving here. You will find tomorrow maybe Naukri might take over, they have a staffing company called Quadrangle. They might take over maybe Aspiring Minds or anything, will move here. The big guys are consolidating all these players together. What will happen to the small and medium scale players? It needs an enabling ecosystem to deliver so that market will be able to get a productive workforce. So this is a change which will happen. It will happen. It's a market need. This is going to happen whether there is funding, there is no funding. This is an enabling ecosystem which will help, which will happen. On the closing thoughts, candidates need to be using as financial vehicles. Important element from a candidate perspective is the recognizing of prior learning. This 357 million people which we are talking about who is illiterate or less than primary, they have got some level of jobs with them, some level of skills with them. in terms of why they are so confident of saying it is our unemployment is only 40 million. So if 40 million is only unemployed, all of them are working and they have some skill. So we need to have a system to recognize this prior learning and converting that into a national vocational framework or whichever way it is, so that we have the skill upgradation or skill operability what we are talking about. From a training company perspective, I don't know, we have to leverage technology. Today we never spoke about a national knowledge network which is being created or being talked about by Sam Pitroda and other things, which is connecting university. Why can't we be part of that entire engine so that a lot of our cost gets subsidized in that sense? From the government side, Rajasthan government used to run an interesting scheme a few years back called Ekalavya scheme. When they take a fresher, they used to give tax holidays or PFESI holidays for 3 months or 6 months for the fresher into that thing. So it was coming as a matching grant from the government. The government should focus on ranking or in terms of giving this interoperability for higher education. See, there was a discussion here in terms of the coaching part of it, which Sanjay was talking about. See, in Kanpur, you have this lot of these coaching mandis. The enrollment, and what they do is after the time, the IIM CAT results and other things, they just put up these results. Based on that results, if the results becomes 80% or 82% for the training institutes, their enrollment dips. It's a transparent system. It's either black or white. You have got through IIMs or you have not got through IIMs. So ranking of this programs, ranking of these institutions is the part of the government which they need to take it out, and they have to release the assets. I mean, we run out of the 1200 employment exchange, 5 or 6 in Karnataka in terms of taking over those employment exchanges and running it. But the government should focus on releasing the backbone, putting up this housing. How many youth hostels are there? Why can't that be released for the private sector? Why should not public money be used for the private sector? The government pays around 30,000 rupees for training on ITI in a government school. Why not pay to us? Or why not pay to anybody up in the ecosystem and hold us responsible on those SLAs? So that's very important from that perspective. From the corporate side, I think this has been discussed, but they should own up the national vocational framework or the industry level framework. And lastly, I think this is very, very critical in the point, skills can only be learned on the job. And in a country like ours, where poverty is in the range of 300 to 400 million, it's very important the corporates open up the doors of internship or apprenticeships for these guys to get the skills. So on that note, I think so.